we get into the video, I wanted to share a special tool that David and I have been using for over 2 years to manage our inventory on Amazon. The tool is called SoStocked, and it is a very powerful tool. It's designed specifically for inventory management. If you're in a physical products business selling on Amazon, you need to be in stock, especially with the inventory restrictions lately. This tool is incredibly powerful. If you're having trouble with inventory management, this might be a tool to help you. SoStocked is partnered with Firing Demand, and they've offered our guests, our listeners, a 30-day free trial. So click the link in the video description to get 30-day free trial. On to the video. Before we get into the video, I wanted to share a special tool that David and I have been using for over 2 years to manage our inventory on Amazon. The tool is called SoStocked, and it is a very powerful tool. It's designed specifically for inventory management. If you're in a physical products business selling on Amazon, you need to be in stock, especially with the inventory restrictions lately. This tool is incredibly powerful. If you're having trouble with inventory management, this might be a tool to help you. SoStocked is partnered with Firing Demand, and they've offered our guests, our listeners, a 30-day free trial. So click the link in the video description to get 30-day free trial. On to the video.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing Demand podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Elizabeth Greene, the co-founder of Jungler.com, which is an agency that helps Amazon sellers with all things Amazon ads and the ecosystem surrounding an Amazon account, which contributes to the success of your ad goals. We were referred to Elizabeth by our friends over at Two Sellers and a Microphone, where Chris Gramlich sent me a one-sentence email saying, Elizabeth was a guest on our show recently, and she brought the fire. We are very excited to have Elizabeth join our show. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me. Guess I gotta bring it this time then. I gotta live up to the reputation.
Absolutely. So for those who have not heard you on a podcast, can you share a little bit with our listeners about your background and your path to becoming a co-founder at Jungler?
My path is kind of interesting. It's maybe a little bit different. So I know you all are big into, firing the man and quitting the day job. I did quit a day job to do this. However, my day job was a stay-at-home mom. So if I fired the man, it was my family. Not essentially, we're still good. We're still tight. But yeah, so my path really was trying to figure out a way to bring the family home, which of course is what you all are doing in Firing the Man, like having family home together, being able to do something for yourself on your own terms. So it was definitely from wanting to do that, which of course, like a lot of other people and your listeners, led us to the world of Amazon. So I like to say, until you pierce through the curtain and recognize that there's something behind the Amazon.com and there's this entire ecosystem, it's really fascinating. So we got into that, which then of course led us to Amazon ads, which led us to what we're doing today. So we definitely focus on partnering with sellers who are looking for really that sales growth acceleration. And we do that through really crafting custom strategies and ads, which I'm super stoked to get into today.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that, Elizabeth. I'm excited to get into it too. So first question we have is, one thing that's constant e-commerce and online businesses is change. Change is always here, right? It's omnipresent. And so in 2023, can you share a little bit about what's working in Amazon advertising in 2023 and what's changed?
Yeah. So a lot of things are still working. I think a lot of the foundation has not been completely shaken, although there's some very recent updates to what they're doing with their match types, not to get insanely technical, but there are some updates that Amazon has recently rolled out that kind of throws, unfortunately, a wrench in the works of a lot of our current strategies and kind of changes up things that have been OG for a while. So that definitely, when you talk about change, keeps us on our toes. But still, I think there's a lot of things very common, which is probably going to be comforting to your listeners. The fact that still most of the accounts, even though Amazon is actually building out sponsor brands and display ads, sponsor product ads are still going to make up the bulk of a lot of accounts today. I don't really see that changing just due to that ad type. Still focusing in on your ideal target market, meaning recognizing keywords that relate very well to your customers and making sure that your ads are served up there. That is always going to be a good strategy because that is core to good advertising is get in front of your target audience. So that's always going to be there. I say the things that are definitely rapidly changing is one, just kind of Amazon continuously rolling out updates, changes to their Amazon platform, and then them constantly rolling out updates and changes to their search pages. It seems like there's always some new widget or section that's popping up on the search pages, which unfortunately what that has done is really push down a lot of the organic placements, which there used to be, quite a few of them, what they consider like top of fold before you start scrolling. Now you're lucky if there's one, which is definitely like kind of increased the competition, which means that, you're paying higher for cost per clicks because one, there's just more sellers on the platform. Everybody, there's still room to grow and sell on Amazon. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. And there's still immense opportunities for those that want to reach out and grab them. So it's not as the market's gotten so saturated. It's just gotten more competitive. And so playing a more sophisticated game has become more important.
Absolutely. So I have two follow-up questions. One, for all the PPC geniuses listening to this, can you just briefly touch on, you had mentioned it was the match types that Amazon's is kind of tweaking. Can you just maybe briefly go over it, not super far in the weeds, but it's just enough?
So for anyone listening who really likes to dig into the nitty-gritty of stuff, if you are familiar with the way that broad match in sponsored brand ads functions, so for your audience who's not quite aware, broad match traditionally in sponsored product ads, say I'm advertising the word running shoes, right? Those two root words, running and shoes, must be present in whatever shopper search. Somebody types in a random long thing, it has to have the word running, it has to have the word shoes in it. This was not the case in sponsored brand ads. Amazon had always functioned like this with broad match to say, we're going to serve you up to also related terms. So I use running shoes because it's similar in the term, say sneakers, right? They're somewhat related, right? Someone who's shopping running shoes might be looking for sneakers and then vice versa. So Amazon would say, okay, we're going to show your ad to these shoppers as well. So the way that they go about kind of selling this to us, I guess you would say, is oh, look at all of these new additional shoppers that you get to get in front of. This is great. It's exposure. It is great, except for when you start showing up in a bunch of terms that don't relate as well to your product, or maybe those particular shoppers don't resonate as much with your offer. And so you can end up getting, inefficient ads that way. That was the way it used to function in sponsored brand ads. They have now carried that over to that is now the way that sponsored product ad broad match functions, which, as I said, sponsored product ads, OG, it's what everybody runs. And unfortunately, with these updates, there was no notifications from Amazon. We're part of the Amazon Partner Program. They didn't do a webinar on this. They didn't let us know. They didn't put it anywhere. What happened is, because I have a bunch of agency friends, we all were like, what the heck is going on with our search term reports? This is not supposed to be here because we know what it's supposed to look like. And we all reached out to our Amazon reps. And if you are on LinkedIn, I want to say this was 3 or 4 months ago, LinkedIn had exploded and everybody was freaking out and nobody knew what was going on because Amazon didn't send any updates and nobody was telling us what was going on, except for if you now go look at Amazon and their the literature that they now have on their site, which explains how the match types work. They just quietly changed their naming on there and how. So we're like, oh, okay, so now it's official because they quietly changed that. So unless you were knee deep in your search term reports, you would have no idea that this is how it works. And they recently did the same thing to sponsored brands exact match type. So now it can also pull loosely relevant terms. Again, strictly for sponsored brand, but it never functioned like that before. And again, nothing except for something weird in the search term reports and a very quiet update to their webpage.
That's interesting. How that's kind of pushed that out on the sly and then kind of covered up for it. Another follow-up question is something that David and I have talked about quite a bit is Amazon. It seems like in the last 12 months, maybe 18 months, they're adding, you already alluded to it earlier, Elizabeth, they're adding more and more ad spots on page one, anywhere on Amazon. And so this does two things in my mind. One is it forces more pay to play. More, you have to have good advertising to sell your products. And two, keyword ranking, it makes keyword ranking less relevant because your ad spots are going to be taken up, unless you're in the top 5 to 7 spots in a keyword, you're going to be on page 3. And so it makes that less relevant. What do you see? And also, I think at the core of it, Amazon is there to make money, right? And ad revenue is very easy money for them because there's not a lot of legwork. And so what do you see? What do you foresee if you have a crystal ball? What does it look like in the next 18 months? Did they continue down this road? Do they halt at some point? What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say, I mean, at some level, they can't completely go all the way. Like, I can't imagine the absolute uproar if the entire page one was simply ad. Also, it doesn't always create a very good shopper experience. So they will always take that into account, I think, at least. And there are some, you could say, sort of hedges against it. So for instance, if you are trying to go and advertise stock, try and see if you can show up for the keyword running shoes. It's near impossible. I can guarantee you the bid you would probably have to put on there to show up anywhere is probably close to like $40, and I'm not even being like ridiculous in that. So there are certain things that they've tried to put in place. So like, even if it becomes very saturated with ads, you're still on some level trying to serve up relevant ads to shoppers. So I do know that those kind of things are in place. What I've seen that it looks like to the end consumer is, or not the end consumer, but the end seller, is just a need to run much more sophisticated, because with it being much more competitive and the necessary, like almost kind of the necessary evil to run just a whole bunch more ads, because that's how you're going to get those organic placements or any placements at all. You really have to be much more intentional. It's no longer like just throw up a bunch of stuff and let's see what sticks and then go pause everything else and, just kind of wash it out. Now, you still can end up with a kind of an interesting strategy at the end of that, but the wasted ad spend along the way, depending on how good your cash flow is, may put you out of business. So it's really important to be able to do that. I mean, what it ends up like and looks like ultimately, I mean, I kind of see where they're trying to push with Amazon ads, at least from what they're saying. So they're talking about a bunch of awareness plays, and they're also like, with this changes to these match type, that's kind of what they're saying. It's like, oh, look how much more awareness that you're able to spread for your product. However, the typical brand owner is very ROI conscious and still very profit conscious. So how that ends up in the middle and what Amazon sellers are kind of willing to stomach, we'll kind of see.
Yeah, I don't think awareness pays the bills for sellers. David, over to you.
Absolutely. So if I look at the path of most Amazon sellers, typically when they first start out, they're going to try to self-manage PPC. Mm-hmm. Ken did, it's kind of the path. As you get further along with it, I would say if there's 100 sellers, maybe 90 of them, this would be one of the first things that they outsource. And so now, instead of managing the day-to-day, like adjusting bids, running search term reports, they are now managing a PPC manager, whether that be an agency or somebody that they bring in-house. So with that in mind, what are some metrics when somebody's managing a PPC manager that they should be looking at every week with the goal of profitability and cash flow and having a good business overall?
That's a great question. And I would definitely, and this is how we like to look at it, I like to look at it through the lens of sales growth. So are we seeing sales growth, right? What do our sales look like? Now, you definitely should be looking at net profits as well. However, I want to caution anyone out there who's just started to look at their net profits and then try and backtrack that into ads. Make sure you fully understand all of your costs and fees that go into Amazon advertising. So for instance, I've had conversations with sellers and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm so unprofitable. It's the ads, it's the ads, it's the ads. And then you'll do the calculations on what their cost of goods are taking up. Or wait, you just did a huge removal order this month, and so you had an extra couple $1,000s on your balance sheet. That's not the ads. And it's not that I don't want anyone to be profitable. I want to caution people about having knee-jerk reactions to turning off ads when that's not necessarily where maybe the bleeding in your profits is coming from. You also want to be looking at total ACOS. So total ACOS is a really good profitability metric. It tells you how much, how your ads relate to the entire account, what percentage of your total sales are being attributed to ads. And that one thing that we like to look at for that is, I call it ad efficiency. So we like to look at total ACOS as well, and then what I call ad sale percentage, or essentially like what percentage of my total sales are being driven through ads. And with those three numbers, plus looking at sales growth, you can get a really good perspective on, okay, so am I seeing, top line growth? And then looking at the other metrics to see like kind of your ad efficiencies.
One follow-up question there is on the sales growth. Say that plateaus. Maybe say you've been running your brand for 2 or 3 or 4 years. You feel like you've taken PPC as far as you can in terms of the number of keywords and everything else. What then? Like, what should you focus on then?
This is a great question. So I dubbed it, it's super clickbaity, sorry, but I dubbed it the Amazon growth equation. So it's essentially like, because we will get this question all the time, what happened to my sales, right? So sales went up, sales went down, what happened? And so a lot of these equations or ways that I've kind of crafted or frameworks for looking at accounts have been through me trying to figure out these quick questions, right? Because if like sales went down, people are like, okay, have you checked the reviews? Have you checked your keyword search volume sales trends? Like, where are you ranking? Maybe your competitors are running coupons. Like, there's all these things that can happen that are external that impact your sales growth. Or it could just be that like maybe your conversion rates are down. You're like, where the heck do I check? And so I came up with a way that you can literally check your trends in 3 different numbers, and you can identify where the sales growth or dip is coming from, and then that allows you to go further down and troubleshoot. So the sales or the Amazon growth equation is essentially, you can calculate your sales if you take your sessions, multiply them times your conversion rate, and multiply that times your average order value. So it's essentially how much traffic is coming into the listing, what is the conversion rate on that traffic, and when I make a conversion, how much do I make? And when I say average order value, it's because it might be slightly different than sale price, because that would account for multiple purchases, which is why you have to calculate it that way. So if you're trying to figure out, why is my growth stagnant? Is my market growing? Meaning sessions. So am I getting more traffic, but maybe less of that traffic is converting? Have I had to go down on my average order value price? Have I had to drop my pricing to keep up with market, but my conversion rate and my sessions have stayed the same? So if you look at it from like this kind of like 3-pronged perspective, you can kind of try and get an idea. And the other way that we look at it is I look at accounts as pieces of a whole. So I really like to look at top line account, meaning like overall. So what's my average, for the entire account? What's my total ACOS? What's my ACOS? What's my ad sale percentages? What does my sales growth look like? But in reality, those numbers at the account level are driven by individual products. If you've been selling for a while, hopefully you have more than one product. So then the question is, but then you added in a whole bunch of catalog complexities, right? So that's most of the time when we get sellers coming to us is they say like, okay, I've built myself up like 10 different products. I've got like you said, I'm downloading these search term reports, and I'm launching all of these campaigns, or I'm doing my bid adjustments, or I'm doing all of the things on my checklist that I'm supposed to be doing to manage my ads. But like I'm looking at my sales growth and I'm going like, what gives? Like doing all these things, advertising, ranking, not translating to sales growth. So what we've started doing is kind of taking a top-down approach and really looking at the account. So if you're gauging growth, we look at an overall perspective. But if we're trying to figure out like, where the heck do we grow this account? You don't actually grow an account, you grow the product. So the question is not, how do I grow my account? The question is, which product do I need to work on to grow the account? What I do is we look at this from pieces of a whole, meaning what impact does each product have on the total account, from a total sales and from an ad spend perspective. So it's actually really easy. Most people look at their business reports. Everyone knows their bestseller, right? They're like, oh, this product's absolutely crushing it for me. This is my bestseller. But the thing that a lot of people don't know is, what are the ad efficiencies on my bestseller? So most times when someone sees a growth dip or they're trying to figure out, how do I grow my sales? What they'll do is they'll look at my top product. Okay, I just need to push my top product more. But like, how do I get this thing moving more? So they'll throw more ads at it. Oftentimes what this does is it makes the account much less profitable because you keep throwing ads. So what you want to do is look at it from a percentages of total. It was like my new favorite thing, because it gives you pieces of the pie. So like, how big of a piece of the pie is each of these individual products? So it's really easy. Take a business report, sort top down, but oftentimes you'll have like numbers, and sometimes when you're trying to gauge the difference between the numbers, you're like, okay, this one's obviously much bigger, and then you've got a couple more, and then like this one, but you don't really know how big of a piece of the pie is it. So all you have to do is you take the sales for that one product, divide it by the sum total of sales for all the products, and then you have your pieces of the pie. So you can say, okay, so this product's making up 40% of my total sales, 24%. Okay, so these are my heavy hitters. But then what you want to do is you want to get the, again, percentages of total. You want to look at the ad spend for all of these products. So I would say exact same thing, ad spend for this product divided by sum total of the ad spend. And sometimes what you will find is that a particular product, we audited in an account. One of the products was making up 15% of the total sales, and they had allocated 24% of their total ad spend to this product. And so they've continuously allocated ad spend, and the product's not growing. It could just be that it's a market thing. Maybe they need to get a better market fit. But what you can do actually, if you track this over time, you could say like, I'm throwing ad dollars at it, and the total percentage is not moving. I'm not getting the bigger pie. I'm just getting less profit on this one slice. So now that you kind of have your perspective of pieces of a whole, then you can look at your ad efficiency. So what I would do is I would say, okay, so this is my top seller, biggest piece of the pie. Maybe it probably has my biggest piece of spend, but what is the ad efficiencies, meaning ACOS, total ACOS, ad sale percentage. So if my biggest piece of the pie has less ad efficiencies, meaning I have a higher than my average account total ACOS on this, and I'm seeing that ad sale percentage. So I call it ad sale percentage. I think you all referred to it as a percentage of organic, like PPC sales. How I calculate it is I take the ad sales divided by total sales. So what percentage of my total sales come from ads, essentially. So if I have a higher total ACOS and I'm seeing that ad sale percentage creep up past 50% and my ACOS is a little bit high, even though it's my best seller, does me throwing ad dollars at it make a lot of sense? Like in this case, no, because I'm simply going to be driving it more unprofitable. I probably should look at refining my ads here, even though I'm saying, hey, I need sales growth and this is my bestseller. That's what everyone wants to go to. So I would say, where can I find a bigger, a big slice of the pie? It's bigger than like 5%, 1% of my total sales. Can I find like, 20, 30%, maybe even a 15%? But then when I look at the ad efficiencies, meaning my total ACOS, highly profitable, my ad sale percentage, I'm like below, maybe I'm below 50, maybe I'm like 35. There's room to push this product. Then that makes sense for me to then go say, where can I grow this piece of the pie to grow the entire pie, because I'm going to be super profitable on it. I'm already super efficient, so there's probably more for me to dig up here.
I think that was dynamite. And I think anybody that has more than 5 products in your catalog right now, you should rewind this and listen to it again and write down everything Elizabeth just said and go execute that. That was excellent. Next question. We're getting like really down in the weeds. I think is great. And so this next question is organic versus PPC. And so this is something that, David and I are in a bunch of masterminds. We're in a bunch of groups. This is hot topic right now, right? And so across our portfolio of brands, we're in that between 40% and 60% swing on organic and paid advertising sales in there. Now, what have you seen with your experience on is there like a sweet spot for profitability and for healthy functioning of a core Amazon FBA business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say you're probably swinging within the average at this point. I remember, I want to say it was only 2 years ago, the general convention used to be if you got anywhere over 30% of your total sales coming from ads, you were wildly inefficient and there was some issues. And like you said, that was before all of the ads moved into the page one and where, all of a sudden all the necessity came for adding ads. So these days I'm seeing closer to a 50-50 split, probably on average. Now, if you're getting more aggressive, you might be leaning closer to a 60%. So the one thing that we do is we will keep a gauge on these. Like it's a metric that we religiously track for all of our brands. And that was literally in like my breakdown when I was saying, look at ad efficiencies. Because if you're like, oh, total ACOS is great, but you're like, wait a minute, 80% of my total sales is coming from ads. So maybe it's not that. Maybe ads are propping up the brand growth. And at that point, if you're profitable, you might just say like, hey, this is the way the product functions. So I would be careful on making too much of a knee-jerk reaction off of ad sale percentage, or like you said, the ratio of organic to ads, if everything else is working. I'm not saying don't work to fix it. I'm just saying I've seen this before where someone say like, oh, this number is bad. So they'll go and turn it off and like screw up their entire like sales trajectory because they were focusing in on one number. So I would say it's definitely a metric to track. Unfortunately, the way that you fix it, so there's 2 scenarios. One scenario is where you're running very, very aggressive ads. You have good organic rankings, but your ads are kind of like eating up a very big piece of the pie. If that is the case, then if you pull back on the ads and you're able to maintain your organic ranking, then you can make this number much better, and it like you're not spending as much on ads. So like everything's wins. The problem is when it's the second scenario, when you are are not ranking well organically, and you also have a heavy ad sale percentage. In that case, if you pull back on ads, that's actually what's driving and propping up your sales. So therefore, you're going to lose out on your total sales. And that creates an obvious problem. And you can end in like what I call like the death spiral, when you're just seeing like month over month, like sales percentages go down, and it's horrifying. And you kind of have to correct for that. And sometimes that correct is very painful and worse off than when you started. So I don't want to tell horror stories. I'm just saying the thing that I've found with managing ads well, and the current thing I'm coaching my team through, are not even necessarily like bid or budget adjustments or keyword selection, although those things are very important. It's one, understanding the analytics, and two, understanding how the analytics relate to each other. And I think if you can figure that out, that's going to lead you to the right ad strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. One last follow-up on that. What have you seen that works in terms of the organic? Obviously, we want more organic, right? The organic sales are what drives profitability. And so what are some ways to increase organic?
You increase organic sales through better ranking, which those ranking campaigns are very simple. You put an exact match campaign, primarily mostly sponsored product, potentially a sponsor brands video ad, maybe, but I would say primarily sponsored product, primarily an exact match, very high bids to hit that top of search placement, and you just go for the sales velocity. The reason why, so most times I get questions on how do you build out a ranking campaign? And the question that's actually being asked, because I've said this on multiple podcasts, I'm like, that's how you build a ranking campaign. If you want to go build out a ranking campaign, set that up today. Everyone does it, and then they look at the ACOS that results from it, and they look at the ad spend that results from it, and they come back and ask me, how do I build out a ranking campaign? And my answer is, the question you're asking is not how do I build a ranking campaign? The question is, how do I make this keyword profitable? Which unfortunately is a matter of your conversion rate and how much the market is willing to pay. Unfortunately, sometimes you sellers will get into a market and they're like, I can't believe somebody's going to pay $5 cost per click for top of search. I'm like, well, your competitors are paying it. And if your competitors are paying it, Amazon's perfectly happy to take their money. So what I find is that it's more a matter of picking the right keywords and picking keywords that you convert on and ones that you actually can gain enough sales velocity on without losing your shirt too much, that it's actually worth it for you to do it in the long run. Now, depending on, again, your cash flow and, kind of how much you can afford at this point, will really determine what that looks like for you. And sometimes new sellers who aren't going in eyes wide open, they're a little bit dissatisfied with what the answer to that question is. And that doesn't mean there's not still a way to play the game. There's definitely a way to still play the game, but you're going to have to play a much more sophisticated game, and it's going to have to be much more of a long-term play. You won't have the pockets to go in, like someone like Nestle or Simple Modern or someone is, to be able to come in and just like absolutely blow something up.
For awareness, at least the awareness piece. David, over to you.
All right. What has been your experience with Amazon ads outside of the U.S. marketplace? Are there any that seem to be more competitive or less competitive? This is something that we've been talking a lot about internally as we launch new products.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is highly dependent on the category. I will say doing market-specific keyword research is insanely important. You want to go through the process of doing keyword research for each individual market exactly the same as you would for any other market out there. So I'll say we do have some sellers that Canada absolutely crushes it. Mexico absolutely crushes it. And the cost per clicks are much lower. So you will end up with that. You might also end up with certain marketplaces. Like for instance, the Netherlands. We had a conversation with some of the other agency owners, and someone was like, is the Netherlands broken? Did our ads actually running? Because I have no impressions whatsoever. That's super normal because the marketplace is very small, and a lot of people in the Netherlands don't shop on Amazon. They're specific. They go to the other marketplaces to shop. So you will have certain cases like that. I would say, typically speaking, in volume, you really can't match Amazon US. That being said, there are certain sub pockets where things just absolutely work. And that's not to say that you can't build $1 million companies strictly in EU or UK markets. I've talked to them. They are running them. It just depends.
Great conversation. I want to get into to, again, profitability, can we talk about ACOS and TACOS? And can you describe maybe give a high level definition of each to share with the listeners, like what they should be focusing on?
Good question. Okay, so ACOS and total ACOS. I'll start with ACOS. It's COG. It's the one that everybody focused on. And then I don't think TACOS became really talked about until maybe about 2 to 3 years ago, probably. So nobody really started talking about it. But ACOS is a metric that is very unique to the Amazon platform. It's kind of the inverse of ROAS. If you're familiar with ROAS, that might kind of make sense to you. So the reason why Amazon specifically can calculate ACOS is because Amazon owns the sale and they own the shopper. That's why you don't get a metric like ACOS on any other platform, because those other ad platforms don't own the conversion. So that's a very unique and valuable thing for like running Amazon ads. You can be very, very certain of the conversion. So with that said, then you have very certain reported sales numbers. So what ACOS is it says, okay, here's my ad spend and I'm going to divide it by my ad sales. So in essence, I get a percentage, which is what percentage of my total ad sales that I gained through running my ads, what percentage of that money had to be spent to acquire those sales, is essentially what you're asking. And so for a focus on ACOS, oftentimes what sellers will do is they will target what's called a break-even ACOS. And that sounds like, how do I calculate that? You don't. You just, what's my profit margin? My profit margin is 30%. My break-even ACOS is 30%. I keep it super simple. To your point, with the ads getting much more competitive, it became much more difficult to have low ACOS numbers. I mean, we used to see screenshots. It was like 5% ACOS, 10% ACOS. Look how amazing I am. And then it became more competitive. And honestly, that was a function of two things. One, the rise in the cost per click. And then two, unfortunately, higher competition, which has caused a decrease in conversion rates. And so that's actually why ACOS is going up. So people looked for another metric. And the other thing that people realized, which is why personally, I don't want to discount ACOS at all. We still look at it. We still use it to manage 100%. However, TACOS or total ACOS gives you a broader perspective of how your ads are actually driving total sales. And it will, if you have perspective, oftentimes it stops you from making poor judgment calls. So with total ACOS, similar thing, but it's looking at how does my ad spend relate to my total account sales. So you would take, again, you're taking your ad spend, same numerator, you're going to divide it by the total sales in your account. So in essence, it says, okay, I'm zooming out and taking a broader perspective. What percentage of my total sales did I have to spend in my ad? And this one, you do not want to be equivalent to your break even or to your profit margins, because if your total ACOS is equivalent to your profit margins, you've essentially made no money and you're simply paying Amazon for the luxury of having a business on their platform, I guess. So that's how your total ACOS can relate to profit. So you would say, okay, I mean, this is quick and dirty math. Please use profit analysis tools or use something more sophisticated than the kind of the rough, dirty math I'm going to give you. If you're trying to figure out how profitable, so if I know after all Amazon fees, my shipping fees, maybe I have a 3PL, I've calculated that on average, I make 30% of my 30% margins when I sell something on the Amazon. Then I could say, okay, so my ACOS, ad spend divided by total sales, is 15%. So 30 minus 15 is 15. So therefore, again, rough 30 napkin math, please use actual profit calculators, but I have 15% margins on my account. So I'm profitable, versus if I was running a total ACOS at 35% and then my profit margins were 30%, I'd be like, great, I am losing 5% of my total sales, so I'm backwards. And so again, rough, dirty napkin math, but it gives you, again, a kind of a pulse on how things are going.
One follow-up on that real quick, just to put some kind of average numbers in there. What have you seen in your experience, a healthy TACOS range? And then what is the point to where you recommend to your clients to back off of PPC spend? What is the high mark?
That's a good question. So it will depend on your profit margin. So it depends on two things, your profit margins, and it also depends on how aggressive the brand would like to scale. Because as you can imagine, as you pull back on ads, sometimes that could, technically pull back sales a little bit. So sometimes it's a test and see sort of thing. Also, in the beginning, your total ACOS will be equivalent to your ACOS because all of your sales are coming from ads at that point. So that's why that whole PPC to organic ratio we were talking about, and how I was talking about like how numbers relate to numbers. That's why that's so important, because if all of my ads are, or if all of my sales are coming from ads, then my, again, my two numbers are equivalent. So I need to gain, some profitable sales. So I'm looking to push up that organic ranking. So as far as what we're seeing, I would say these days, again, kind of like going back to the day, like 2 years ago, everyone was like, if you were running over 8% of your total sales, like you're super unprofitable. And that would have been right, because the platform didn't necessitate running that large scale of ads. Then it was closer to 10%. And so we're running some of our accounts like closer to 10% these days. However, closer to a 15% is not abnormal. Now, what you can get away with is actually going to be highly dependent on your conversion rate. So I've talked to some very large businesses. So for instance, Simple Modern, they actually did a whole test where they completely turned off ads just to see if they could get away with it. And it turned out it did decrease sales. However, it also increased profits. So they've since gone back to running ads. Currently, they run about a 4%, which is very abnormal for Amazon sellers. However, the two things they do that allow them to do that is, one, hyper focus on conversion rates. Like if conversion rates are not hacking it, they will cut the product because it's not worth it to them, because they're looking at, does our consumer like it? They also have brand recognition as well, so that helps with sales. But the second thing that they do is they see it as almost reinvesting what they would have spent on ads in lowering their prices. So they keep very, very competitive prices, which allows them to kind of dial back on ads and run it that way. So they're still running 4% of their business, which is like, their business is massive on Amazon. So 4% seems small. It's quite significant ad spend, but they're focused on the other thing. So if you're not going to give your shoppers a good price, and you're like, oh, my listing's fine. It was like, I had this for 2 years. It always worked. And you're not like constantly trying to reinvent and like better speak to your shoppers, you're not going to get away with being able to run low total ACOS. So I would say these days it's probably closer to 15%. Now, if you're heading upwards, like if someone's getting really aggressive these days, heading it upwards to a 20 makes me slightly nervous. If you're, if your margins can handle it, and you're like, I just want to scale this thing, like I'm growth focused, I have the cash flow, I want to be a big brand, I'm here for it, you can do that. You want to make sure to know like what you're getting into. And if you're constantly hammering at a 20% and you're pulling back and you're like, sales take an absolute nosedive, and so you have to continuously push it up, you want to take a very long, hard look at your conversion rates and how your products are resonating with the market.
No, that's excellent. Over to you, David.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit more about Jungler?
So we are an Amazon ad agency, like I said, focused on helping sellers grow their sales, like I said, through custom ad strategies. So that whole like BLI talked about it, looking percentages of total and like digging into it. And like, that's how we view ads. So a lot of people will say like, oh, we have to have these, like everyone here has gotten an audit, right? They're like, you're missing this ad type and you're not using these keywords. And here's 3 negative keywords that you've missed, and you're not using placement percentages. Like they're looking at the ad strictly from, this is how a account is well run. And we use that. We know that we're using those checklists, but what we're not doing is saying, hey, you need to run all of these ads for every single product. Every single product does not need to have a completely insanely built out ad structure. There are some products that the potential ads or like the potential sales for that product cannot support that kind of ad structure. So having just a blanket approach and like these are the campaigns we run checklist is not going to serve the account well. So what we'll do is we'll look at it from a top-down perspective. We'll say, okay, what are we actually looking to achieve? What is the best ad structure that's going to get us there? So for hyper-focused on profitability, there's certain strategies we run. If we need a more ranking, we have a more growth focus. There's other strategies we'll lean heavily into. And then again, looking at the products as pieces of a whole, and then building out the ad strategy according to what we're seeing in the numbers and what we're seeing in the sales trends. Again, not necessarily just a good ad account looks like. For that, and because we're hyper focused on Amazon ads, like that's our one shtick, that's our game, that's why we're so good at it, then we function well as a partner with someone who's like, hey, look, I've got my catalog, it's resonating, I really want to grow this thing, but I'm looking at my ad account and going, I don't have someone to drive innovation on this, and I'm not at a point yet where it makes sense for me to bring someone in-house. Because honestly, with all the changes to the ad platform, you have to have someone driving innovation. Now, sometimes the account owner, they love ads and they're like, this is my jam. I freaking love it. I feel like I'm super qualified. All the stuff you're talking about, I'm just going to listen to podcasts like this and I'm going to get the strategies. I'm going to implement it because I want to be, but there has to be someone. So even if you're like, oh, I'm going to get a VA, I'm going to put them on my team, they're still following your SOPs. Somebody's got to write the SOPs. And when something changes to the match types or when something changes in the ad platform, somebody's got to be the one to look at it, understand how it fits into the ad structure, and then go adjust the SOP. And if that's not going to be you, then you need to find somebody who it's going to be. And there's some people who are like, I don't have someone on my team for that, or I'm just trying to build out my team right now, and I don't have time. I can't figure this out. And so those are the people that were like, well, that's what we do. So if you need help.
Very nice. Very nice. Over to you, Ken.
Yeah, for sure. So, Elizabeth, we round out our show with every guest with a fire round. It's where we put our guests through the ringer. Are you ready?
I hope so. We'll see.
What is your favorite book?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So current favorite is $100 Million Offers by Alex Ramosi. Super looking forward to his $100 Million Leads book. I don't remember, was this Saturday he's releasing it? Something like that.
Very cool. That one's on my shelf. I'm going to get to it soon, I hope.
Yes.
What are your hobbies?
Oh, goodness. So my hobbies honestly are like family and work. If I did something for fun, it would probably be riding our four-wheeler.
Awesome. I like that. What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man or the family?
So I do like being on my own agenda. I like being able to set up a game and then try and figure out how to play it. I think that's my most favorite thing.
Okay. Awesome. That's a very common answer. All right. Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I would have to say it is they're viewing everything like a challenge and not giving over power to something else. Meaning at least I deal a lot with Amazon sellers. So the Amazon sellers that I see succeed are like, oh, conversion rates went down. Okay, what's driving it? What can we do? What are my options? All right, execute. The ones that don't do well are the ones who will look at it and it's like, oh, I need help troubleshooting this. And so you'll go in and be like, oh, well, I see this, this, and this. No, that can't be it because like this. No, that's not it. It's this. It's the competitors. It's Amazon being terrible. And when you put off this is why it's happening on someone else, that means that there's nothing you can do about it because it's in someone else's play. So if you take it on as a challenge and you rise to the challenge and you just don't quit, those are the people I see succeeding.
Excellent answer. I totally agree. Cool. David, over to you to close out the show.
Absolutely. Elizabeth, if people are interested in getting in touch with you or working with Jungler, what is the best way?
Yeah, so the best way is going to be going to our website, jungler.com. There should be a form at the bottom. You can, if you want to submit, get on a call with us. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. One thing that I start with is goals. So we'll go over like, what do you actually want to do, get out of your Amazon business? And actually really fun. I just updated the website. If someone has a question about Amazon advertising, I'm really trying to give back to the community a lot more, as much as I possibly can. So at the top of the menu bar, you'll actually see like Ask an Expert that will take you to a form where you can submit a question specifically on Amazon advertising. And I've been getting some good ones and actually making full YouTube videos out of them. So if you want a question answered.
Awesome. Very nice. Well, want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast and looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a blast.